The family dinner table fell silent as my mother-in-law, Eleanor Sullivan, slammed her designer handbag onto the mahogany surface. "This charade has gone on long enough," she declared, pulling out a stack of papers. "I've hired private investigators to look into your background, Linda. It's time my son knew the truth about who he married." I kept my face carefully neutral, continuing to feed my 6-month-old daughter her baby food. My husband Michael looked between us, confusion evident on his face. "Mom, what are you talking about?" Eleanor spread the papers dramatically across the table. "Your wife isn't just a secretary at Morgan Enterprises as she claims. She's been lying about everything. If only she knew how right and wrong she was at the same time. Yes, I wasn't just a secretary. I was the CEO and majority owner of Morgan Enterprises, working undercover to investigate a series of suspicious acquisitions. But I couldn't reveal that yet, not until we found out who was trying to steal my company." According to these investigations, Eleanor continued smugly, she's been accessing confidential company files, attending secret meetings, and hiding her real activities from everyone. Michael turned to me, hurt in his eyes. "Linda, is this true?" I started, but Eleanor wasn't finished. "She's obviously trying to steal company secrets for a competitor. Why else would a mere secretary have access to the CEO's private files?" She turned to Michael. "Darling, I've already contacted our lawyers. We can have this marriage annulled, claiming fraud." What Eleanor didn't know was that her own recent activities had raised red flags in our security system. Anonymous shell companies trying to buy up Morgan Enterprises stock. Suspicious emails from offshore accounts, all traced back to the Sullivan family's private server. "Think about it," Eleanor pressed. "Have you ever seen her boss? This mysterious CEO she claims to work for. No one has, because she's been lying about everything." Michael looked torn. We'd met when he came to fix the company's 8 systems. Me pretending to be a secretary, him unaware that I owned the building he was working in. It had been real, falling in love with someone who didn't know about my wealth or power. "There's more," Eleanor smiled coldly. "I've already spoken to Morgan Enterprises' board of directors. They're very interested in what I've discovered of their employees' activities." My phone buzzed. A message from my head of security. "URGENT, Sullivan Industries attempting hostile takeover. Emergency board meeting call for tomorrow." Eleanor was right about one thing. It was time for the truth to come out. Just not the truth she expected. As if on cue, my daughter knocked over her bowl of baby food, splattering Eleanor's evidence files with pureed carrots. "You can't even control your own child." Eleanor snapped. "How could you possibly be anything more than what you are? A secretary who tricked my son into marriage?" I stood up slowly, wiping my daughter's face. "You're right, Eleanor. It's time everyone knew the truth." I pulled out my phone, pressing a single button. Send in the files. The doorbell rang, and Eleanor's smug smile began to fade. The door opened to reveal James Parker, Morgan Enterprises' silver-haired chief legal officer. Behind him stood a team of serious-looking executives, all members of the board Eleanor had claimed to be in contact with. "Mrs. Sullivan." James nodded politely at my mother-in-law. "I believe you've been expecting us, though perhaps not quite like this." Eleanor's perfectly manicured hands began to shake. I don't understand. I spoke with the board yesterday." "No," James corrected, setting down his briefcase. "You spoke with actors hired by your private investigator. The real board has been monitoring your activities very carefully." Michael stood up, tech expert mind quickly connecting dots. "Mom, what have you done?" James pulled out a laptop, displaying emails and financial records. "Mrs. Sullivan has been attempting to orchestrate a hostile takeover of Morgan Enterprises through a series of shell companies. Unfortunately for her, she was trying to steal from the wrong person." "That's ridiculous," Eleanor protested. "I was protecting the company from her." She jabbed a finger at me. "She's the one accessing confidential files." "Of course she is," James smiled. "They're her files." The room went silent except for my daughter's happy babbling as she played with her spoon. "What do you mean, her files?" Michael asked quietly. I took a deep breath. "My full name is Linda Morgan Chen. I'm not the CEO's secretary. I'm the CEO and majority shareholder of Morgan Enterprises." Eleanor laughed hysterically. "Impossible. The CEO is a reclusive genius who never appears in public." Everyone knows that. Yes, James agreed. A carefully crafted image that allowed Ms. Morgan to work alongside her employees, learning every aspect of her company while watching for corporate espionage. Like, for example, a mother-in-law using her son's credentials to hack our systems. Michael's face went pale. Mom used my security access? Every time you worked late, I explained gently, your mother's team was using your credentials to probe our networks. We detected it months ago, but needed to understand the full scope of the operation. Eleanor's composure cracked completely. You don't understand. Sullivan Industries is failing. We needed this acquisition to survive. About Sullivan Industries, James interjected, pulling out more documents. Our investigation uncovered some interesting transfers from your company's pension fund. But before he could continue, Eleanor grabbed her phone and pressed a button. Suddenly, every computer screen in the house lit up with the same message. Data transfer initiated. If I'm going down, she snarled, I'm taking your precious company's secrets with me. What she didn't notice was my daughter, still playing with her spoon, happily pressing buttons on the special toy phone I'd given her to play with. A phone that was about to disrupt Eleanor's entire plan. Data transfer complete. The screens flashed, and Eleanor's triumphant smile lasted exactly 3 seconds before all the displays changed to show a cartoon baby giggling. What? What is this? She demanded. I picked up my daughter's toy phone. A decoy network. Did you really think I'd let you access our real systems through Michael's home office? Every file you thought you were stealing has been fake, created specifically for you to find. Impossible. Eleanor's perfectly maintained facade was crumbling. Our tech team confirmed. Your tech team. Michael interrupted, understanding dawning on his face. You mean the same team that's been helping you empty our employees' pension funds? James nodded gravely. We have proof that Sullivan Industries has been systematically draining their pension accounts to fund this takeover attempt. Over 3,000 employees' retirement savings gone. Eleanor's phone rang. Her face went ashen as she read the message. No, this isn't happening. That would be the SEC, James explained. They're currently raiding Sullivan Industries offices. Your board members are being arrested as we speak. But Eleanor wasn't listening anymore. She was staring at her phone, fingers flying across the screen. You think you've won? I still have one card left to play. She looked up with a dangerous smile. Tell them about Project Phoenix, Linda. Tell them what Morgan Enterprises is really working on. I felt the blood drain from my face. Project Phoenix was our most classified research initiative, a quantum computing breakthrough that could revolutionize global communications. No one outside the highest levels of the company knew about it. How do you know about Phoenix? I demanded. Because Eleanor's smile widened. I have someone on the inside. Someone much closer than you think. She looked meaningfully at Michael. My husband stood frozen, his face unreadable. Michael? I whispered. What is she talking about? I'm so sorry, Linda, he said quietly. But there's something I never told you about why I really came to work at Morgan Enterprises. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees as my world began to tilt on its axis. But before Michael could continue, our daughter let out a happy squeal and pressed one more button on her toy phone. The screens around us suddenly filled with new information that made both Michael and Eleanor's faces go white with shock. Project Phoenix isn't what you think it is, I said quietly, as the screens displayed the full truth of our quantum computing research. It was never about communications technology. My daughter giggled again, pressing more buttons on her special phone. Actually, a quantum encrypted controller connected to Morgan Enterprises' real network. It's about protection. Michael finished, his voice filled with dawning understanding. You were building a defense system. Eleanor stared at the screens in confusion. I don't understand. Our intelligence said. Your intelligence was exactly what we wanted you to find, I explained. Because Project Phoenix's real purpose is to detect and prevent corporate espionage. Like, for example, tracking when someone tries to steal employee pension funds. The screens showed a complex web of financial transactions, every move Sullivan Industries had made, every account they tried to hide, all mapped and documented by our quantum AI. But Michael. Eleanor turned desperately to her son. You said you found evidence of illegal research. The files you accessed were planted, Michael said, because I already knew the truth about Phoenix. I've known for months. My turn to be surprised. You knew? He smiled savely. I figured it out 3 months ago. The quantum signatures in the network, the pattern recognition algorithms, it could only be defensive technology. That's when I started feeding my mother false information. Eleanor's face contorted with rage. You betrayed me? Your own mother? You betrayed your employees, Michael shot back. Their retirement savings, their futures, and for what? Corporate greed? James stepped forward with more documents. Mrs. Sullivan, we've recovered all the pension funds. They've been secured and returned to their rightful owners with interest. But the takeover, Eleanor sputtered, was never going to work. I finished, because Project Phoenix had already identified and blocked every potential attack vector. Your entire plan was contained from the start. My daughter chose that moment to throw her quantum controller, hitting Eleanor's designer handbag and spilling its contents, including a flash drive labeled Phoenix Data. Your final evidence, I picked up the drive, contains nothing but baby photos, which honestly is rather fitting. As FBI agents arrived to arrest Eleanor, Michael turned to me. I should have told you I knew. And I should have told you who I really was, I replied. No more secrets. He smiled, picking up our daughter. No more secrets. 1 year later, Morgan Enterprises' quantum defense system protects companies worldwide from corporate theft. Eleanor serves time for pension fraud, teaching financial literacy classes to fellow inmates, a fitting punishment for someone who stole retirement dreams. Michael now officially heads our cybersecurity division, using his skills to help others instead of hiding them. Our daughter has a real toy phone now, though she sometimes misses her quantum controller. As for me, I still work alongside my employees regularly, but now they know who I am. Because the best way to protect something valuable isn't to hide it away. It's to build a community strong enough to defend it together. The real Project Phoenix wasn't just about quantum computing or corporate defense. It was about rising from the ashes of old secrets to build something truly transparent. Eleanor's office at Sullivan Industries is now a daycare center for our employees' children. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about making sure the next generation never has to face the same battles.
I still remember the day they sold my car, a used Honda Civic I'd bought with 2 years of savings from my part-time jobs. I stood in our driveway watching the new owner drive away with my independence while my mother beamed like she just solved world hunger. Your brother needs this money more than you need a car, she said, counting the cash. Michael's MBA is an investment in this family's future. Michael, my golden child younger brother, didn't even look up from his phone. Thanks, sis. I'll totally make it up to you once I'm a big shot executive. I was 22, fresh out of college with a computer science degree they hadn't bothered to attend the graduation for. Michael was their pride and joy, accepted into Wharton's MBA program with grades that were mediocre at best. But in my parents' eyes, business school was the only path to success. You can take the bus to your programming job, my father added, already stuffing the money into an envelope marked Michael's tuition. It's not like you need to impress anyone. My programming job. They made it sound like I was fixing printers at a strip mall. In reality, I just landed a junior developer position at Eclipse Technologies, one of the fastest-growing software companies in Boston. But they'd never bothered to ask the details. The bus doesn't run to my office park, I said quietly. Then walk, Michael smirked. Consider it exercise. God knows you spend too much time in front of computers anyway. That night, I sat in my tiny bedroom looking at my bank account. The car money would have covered my deposit on an apartment near work. Instead, I was stuck living at home watching Michael pack for his bright future, while my parents fawned over his every move. My phone buzzed, a message from Alex Chin, my team lead at Eclipse. Your code for the security patch is brilliant. Want to grab coffee tomorrow? Have an interesting proposition for you. That coffee meeting changed everything. Alex had spotted something in my work that others had missed. He was leaving Eclipse to start his own company, focusing on AI-driven cybersecurity. He wanted me as his first hire. It's a risk, he admitted over steaming cups at the local cafe. No guaranteed salary for the first year. Just equity and a promise. I thought about my parents' dismissal, Michael's smirk, the empty space in our driveway where my independence used to park. I'm in. For the next 6 months I worked 2 jobs. Days at Eclipse, nights and weekends with Alex in his garage-turned-office. My parents barely noticed my absence. They were too busy FaceTiming with Michael, cooing over his business school adventures. He's networking with future CEOs, my mother gushed at dinner one night. Meanwhile, you're still playing with computers in some startup. If she'd bothered to check, she'd have known that some startup had just secured its first major client, a Fortune 100 bank desperate for our AI security solutions. But I kept quiet, remembering Alex's words about staying under the radar until we were ready. The first year was brutal. I slept on Alex's couch after we lost the garage office, coding until my eyes burned. My parents' constant updates about Michael's successful business school career became background noise. He's got an interview at McKinsey, my father announced proudly. Now that's a real career. I nodded, not mentioning that our startup, now named Quantum Shield, had just been valued at $50 million after our series of funding. Alex and I had celebrated with cheap champagne in our new office. A real office with actual furniture and a view of the Boston skyline. 3 years passed. Michael graduated with his MBA, his future supposedly secured. My parents threw him a lavish party, inviting everyone they knew to celebrate their son's achievement. Michael's already interviewing at top firms, my mother told anyone who would listen. Unlike some people who waste their time with risky ventures. I showed up late to the party, having just finished a meeting with our board. Quantum Shield had grown beyond our wildest dreams. Our AI security systems protected banks, governments, and tech giants. We'd opened offices in 3 countries. And I hadn't told my family any of it. "Oh, you came," Michael said, champagne in hand. "Still doing that coding thing?" I smiled, thinking of the nameplate on my corner office. Alexandra Matthews, Chief Executive Officer. Something like that. "Well, not everyone can be successful," he said with fake sympathy. "But hey, at least you're employed." Sort of. My phone buzzed. Our head of HR. "Final candidate list for executive positions is ready for your review. You won't believe who just applied." I opened the attachment and there it was. Michael Matthews, MBA. Applying for a VP position at Quantum Shield, not knowing his sister was the CEO he'd have to impress. "Actually," I said to Michael, "I have an early meeting tomorrow. Big things happening at work." He laughed. "Right. Big things. Like a promotion to senior code monkey." I left the party early, driving my new Tesla, not that they'd noticed, back to my penthouse apartment. Tomorrow would be interesting. Michael's interview was scheduled for 9 a.m. sharp. In my home office, I reviewed his application. Mediocre grades from Wharton, no real work experience, just internships and networking opportunities. But the confidence in his cover letter was staggering. "I will revolutionize your company's approach to business." I poured myself a glass of wine, remembering the day they sold my car. An investment in the family's future, they'd called it. Tomorrow, Michael would learn exactly what kind of future his sister had built, without an MBA, without their support, and without their precious car money. Quantum Shield's headquarters occupied the top 10 floors of Boston's most prestigious office tower. I arrived early, watching the sunrise reflect off neighboring buildings while I reviewed Michael's interview schedule. "He's waiting in the lobby," my assistant Emma reported, wearing a suit that probably cost more than his first month's salary would be, if we were actually considering hiring him. I smiled, remembering Michael's designer wardrobe, all funded by our parents' investment in his future. "How's he acting? Like he already owns the place." He told reception to make sure Matthews knows he's here early. Apparently, he thinks that's impressive. I checked my appearance in the office's glass wall designer suit CEO badge, the quiet confidence that came from building a billion-dollar company from nothing. Let's not keep him waiting. Send him to conference room A. But first, give me the full report from his preliminary interviews. Emma handed me a tablet. "It's interesting." He talked over the HR director, mansplained cybersecurity to our female VPs, and told the board member he interviewed with that their current business model was outdated. Sounds like Michael. I scrolled through the notes. Has he figured out who I am yet? No. He assumes Matthews is a man. Called you him several times during the process. Perfect. I gathered my materials and headed to the conference room, remembering all the times Michael had dismissed my work as playing with computers. He stood when I entered, his practiced MBA smile freezing as recognition hit. "Alex." That's Ms. Matthews to you. I sat at the head of the table. Or C.O. Matthews if you prefer formality. He sank back into his chair, face draining of color. This is your company? Quantum Shield. Yes. That coding thing you've mocked for years built this. I gestured to the view of Boston spread out below us. Though I'm surprised you didn't know. We're quite well known in the business world, you claim to understand so well. But you're just a programmer. A programmer who built $1 billion company while you were learning PowerPoint at Wharton. I opened his resume. Speaking of which, let's discuss your application. Michael's confidence visibly crumbled as I went through his experience point by point. Every internship, every leadership opportunity, suddenly seemed small in the face of what I'd accomplished. Your grades were mediocre, I noted. But I'm sure that car money helped cover tuition. He flinched. Alex, listen, about the car. Ms. Matthews, I corrected. And I'm not interested in apologies. I'm interested in why you think you're qualified for an executive position at my company. I have an MBA from Wharton. Yes, you mentioned that 6 times in your cover letter. What else? Silence. No major accomplishments? No revolutionary ideas? Just daddy's money and a degree. I closed his file. Tell me, Michael, how's that MBA working out? He straightened his designer tie, trying to recover. Look, we're family. Surely that counts for something. Family. I laughed. Was I family when you took my car? When you dismissed my career? When you and our parents treated me like a failure? That was years ago. People change. Yes, they do. I pressed the intercom. Emma, please escort Mr. Matthews out. And make sure his application status is updated to rejected, not qualified. Wait. He stood up desperately. Mom and Dad will be devastated. They've been telling everyone about this interview. I thought about all the parties, all the celebrations of Michael's achievements while they ignored mine. They'll survive. Though you might want to update them on who's really successful in this family. As security arrived to escort him out, his face turned ugly. You're doing this for revenge. No, Michael. I'm doing this because you're not qualified. Your MBA doesn't entitle you to success. I turned back to my work. The bus stop is 2 blocks east. Consider the walk exercise. After he left, Emma brought in my next meeting's materials. Your mother's called 6 times already. Send them an email, I said. Official company letterhead. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Matthews, thank you for your son's interest in Quantum Shield. Unfortunately. Want me to add that the CO sends her personal regrets? No. I smiled. Add that the position has been filled by someone with actual experience. Someone who didn't need a car sold to fund their future. That evening, as I drove my Tesla home, my phone exploded with family messages. My mother's panic was palpable. Why didn't you tell us? We would have supported you. My father tried guilt. Family should help family succeed. Michael sent a single text. You've ruined everything. I parked in my building's private garage thinking about that empty driveway years ago. No, I typed back. I built everything. Without your MBA. Without their support. And without that car. The next day, the Business News announced Quantum Shield's latest acquisition, a struggling consulting firm that specialized in MBA placement. My first executive decision? Implementing a new hiring policy that prioritized practical experience over business school degrees. When Michael's next job application crossed my desk, this time for an entry-level position, I had Emma send our standard rejection letter. At the bottom, I added a personal note. Perhaps try learning to code. I hear it's more valuable than PowerPoint skills. Sometimes success isn't about proving others wrong. Sometimes it's about building something so magnificent that their expectations become irrelevant. And sometimes, just sometimes, it's about watching your MBA-wielding brother realize that his sisters, playing with computers, built an empire his business degree couldn't buy him into. A month later, I heard through family gossip that Michael had finally found a job, at a small tech startup, learning to code. Sometimes karma has a sense of humor. I sent him a bus pass as a congratulations gift. After all, family should help family succeed. The empty space where my car once sat had been filled with something far more valuable. The knowledge that success doesn't come from degrees or family support. It comes from believing in yourself when no one else will. And maybe, just maybe, from proving that a programmer with a dream can outshine an MBA with all the advantages in the world.
The plate shattered against the wall inches from my head, porcelain shards raining down like angry tears. I said, "Get out." Maria screamed, already reaching for another plate. "Anthony runs things now. We don't need you anymore." I stood my ground, watching my stepmother's face contort with rage. Behind her, my stepbrother Anthony smirked, already wearing the chef's coat that had belonged to my father. It had been his pride and joy for 30 years. Now it hung loose on Anthony's shoulders, the name Marcos stitched in faded gold thread across the pocket. "My name is Isabella Romano, and until 2 months ago, I was the sous chef at Marco's, the Italian restaurant my father had built from nothing. I'd spent 15 years in that kitchen, starting as a dishwasher at 13, learning every recipe, every technique, every secret that made our food special. But now Dad was gone, and with him, everything I'd worked for. "You can't do this," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the anger burning in my chest. "Dad wanted me to run the restaurant. Everyone knows that." Maria laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "Everyone knows. Where's the proof? The will leaves everything to me, and I say Anthony's in charge now. You're just the help, and you're fired." I looked past her to Anthony, who was leaning against the prep station like he owned it. He'd shown up 6 months ago, right after Dad's diagnosis. Maria's 25-year-old son from her first marriage, suddenly interested in the family business after years of ignoring it. "You don't even know how to cook," I said to him. "You've never worked a day in this kitchen." He shrugged, adjusting my father's coat. "I'm a quick learner. Besides, how hard can it be? Follow the recipes, plate it nice, collect the money. Simple." Simple. The word hit me like another thrown plate. He had no idea what went into running Marco's. The pre-dawn trips to the market to select perfect ingredients. The hours of prep work, the carefully guarded family recipes, the relationships with suppliers built over decades. "The recipes," I said slowly, realization dawning. "You think you can just walk in and recreate Dad's food?" Maria's smile faltered slightly. "Don't be ridiculous. All the recipes are here in the kitchen. We don't need you to." "Those aren't the real recipes," I cut her off, feeling a small spark of satisfaction as her face paled. "Dad never wrote down the actual family recipes. He taught them to me, step by step, over years. What you have are the basic versions we give to prep cooks." "You're lying," Anthony snapped, but I saw the uncertainty in his eyes. "Am I? Try making Dad's marinara sauce from those recipe cards. See how it compares to what our customers expect. Or the tiramisu that won Best Dessert in Chicago 3 years running. Good luck matching that." Maria stormed forward, grabbing my arm. "You think you're so clever? We'll figure it out. Now get out of my restaurant before I call the police." I yanked my arm free, straightening my spine. "Your restaurant? Everything here? Every dish, every technique, every secret that makes this place special came from Dad. From our family, not yours." "Your family?" Maria's voice dripped with venom. "I was his wife. You're just his daughter from his first marriage. I have the papers, the will, everything. You have nothing." The words stung, but I refused to let them see me cry. Instead, I reached into my pocket and pulled out my father's lucky coin, the 1943 steel penny he carried every day since opening the restaurant. "Dad gave me this the night before he died," I said quietly. "Told me to keep it safe, that I'd know when to use it. I didn't understand then, but I do now." Maria's eyes fixed on the coin. "That belongs to the restaurant. Give it here." I closed my fingers around it, backing toward the door. "You have the restaurant, Maria, but Dad left me something more valuable than property or papers. When you figure out what that is, you'll know where to find me." I walked out of Marco's for the last time, ignoring Maria's shouts behind me. The late afternoon sun painted the Chicago streets gold, the same color as the thread on my father's chef's coat. Tears finally came as I reached my car, but I wiped them away quickly. Dad had taught me more than recipes. He taught me patience, persistence, and planning. Most importantly, he taught me that sometimes you have to lose everything to come back stronger. I started the engine, watching Anthony and Maria argue through the restaurant's front window. They thought they'd won, that they'd taken everything from me, but Dad's last lesson was still to come, and they had no idea what was heading their way. 3 months after being thrown out of Marco's, I stood in my tiny apartment kitchen, perfecting the last details. The marinara sauce simmered on the stove, its aroma bringing back memories of countless mornings beside my father, learning the exact moment to add each ingredient. My phone buzzed. A text from Nena, my best friend who'd been a waitress at Marco's for a decade before Maria fired her too. It's bad, Bella. Really bad. They lost the Rossini wedding booking. I wasn't surprised. The Rossini family had been loyal customers for 20 years, celebrating every milestone at Marco's. But according to Nana's regular updates, the restaurant was hemorrhaging longtime patrons. Anthony's simplified versions of Dad's recipes weren't fooling anyone. Another text, Maria's desperate. She's trying to hire her way out of it. Third chef this month. I smiled, stirring the sauce. Let them scramble. The timing was perfect. The coin Dad gave me, his lucky steel penny, sat on my counter beside a worn leather notebook. I'd found it the day after his funeral, hidden in his old recipe box where he told me to look. Inside were his real recipes, written in his careful hand, along with something else. The deed to a small storefront 3 blocks from Marco's. For my Isabella, the note had read, "Sometimes you have to lose a battle to win the war. When the time comes, you'll know what to do. Love, Dad." The storefront had been empty for years, but Dad had kept paying the rent quietly, planning ahead even as his health failed. Now, after months of late nights and every penny of my savings, it was almost ready. My phone rang. An unknown number. Isabella Romano. I answered, though I already knew who it was. "Miss Romano." The voice was smooth, professional. "This is James Wheeler from the Chicago Restaurant Association. I'm calling about the nomination." "Yes, Mr. Wheeler. The committee has reviewed your application for the Rising Star Chef competition. We're intrigued by your concept. A modern take on traditional Italian cuisine, you said." I looked around my test kitchen, at the recipes I'd spent months adapting and perfecting. Dad's classics with my own twists, honoring tradition while embracing innovation. "That's right," I replied. "Everything made from scratch, using techniques passed down through generations." "Fascinating," Wheeler said, "especially given your background at Marco's. I understand there's been quite a change in management there recently." "You could say that." "Well, Miss Romano, the committee would like to invite you to compete. The event is in 6 weeks. The winner, as you know, receives significant press coverage and investment funding." I gripped the phone tighter. "I'll be there." After hanging up, I picked up Dad's coin, running my thumb over its worn surface. The competition would put me head-to-head with Chicago's best up-and-coming chefs. More importantly, it would put me in a spotlight, exactly where I needed to be. My phone buzzed again. "Nina, you won't believe this. Anthony just tried to make Dad's ossobuco for a food critic. It was a disaster. The review goes live tomorrow." Perfect timing indeed. The next morning, the Chicago Tribune's scathing review of Marco's went viral. A pale imitation of its former glory, the critic wrote. "Whatever magic made Marco's special has vanished, replaced by mediocrity and pretension." I was in my new kitchen when Maria finally called. "We need to talk," she said, her voice tight with forced politeness. "About what?" "The recipes. The real ones. Name your price." I laughed softly. "They're not for sale, Maria. Neither is Dad's legacy." "Don't be stupid," she snapped, her facade cracking. "This is business. Everything has a price." "Not everything," I replied. "But don't worry. You'll be seeing me soon enough." I hung up before she could respond, returning to my prep work. The Rising Star competition was 5 weeks away, and I had a statement to make. In his notebook on the last page, Dad had written something that I now understood. "Success is the best revenge, but timing is everything. Wait until they're desperate, then show them what they threw away." The night of the Rising Star competition arrived. Chicago's culinary elite packed into the grand ballroom of the Palmer House. 8 chef stations lined the walls, mine positioned directly across from the judges' table. I tied on my apron, simple black cotton, no flashy logos or names. Just the steel penny, now fashioned into a pin, catching the light. "Chef Romano." A judge approached my station. "Your menu concept is interesting. Reimagined Italian classics." I nodded, arranging my ingredients. "My father's recipes adapted for modern tastes." "Your father?" His eyes widened with recognition. "Marco Romano." Before I could answer, a commotion erupted at the entrance. Maria and Anthony burst in, her face flushed with anger. She can't compete, Maria shouted, pointing at me. Those are our recipes, our property. The room fell silent. Head Judge Wheeler stepped forward, frowning. Mrs. Romano, this is a private event. If you have concerns. I have proof, Maria interrupted, waving a folder. Documents showing I own all rights to Marco's recipes and techniques. I continued prepping, letting her make a scene. Everything was going exactly as planned. Mrs. Romano, Wheeler said firmly, this competition judges original interpretations of classical cuisine. Chef Isabella's menu, while inspired by her father's work, consists of her own creations. Let them stay, I called out, not looking up from my station. Let them watch. Wheeler hesitated, then nodded. Security escorted Maria and Anthony to seats near the judge's table. Over the next 2 hours, I cooked with a focus I'd inherited from my father. Each dish was a tribute and a transformation. His marinara sauce lightened with roasted cherry tomatoes. His ossobuco reimagined with short ribs and modern plating. When I presented my final course, tiramisu deconstructed into elegant components, I heard gasps from the judges. Even Maria had fallen silent. Wheeler took another bite, closing his eyes. It's Marco's tiramisu, but elevated. Familiar yet completely new. I smiled, touching the penny on my apron. My father taught me that tradition isn't about freezing the past. It's about carrying it forward. The judges conferred briefly. Wheeler stood. Ladies and gentlemen, we have our winner, Chef Isabella Romano. The applause was thunderous. As cameras flashed, I saw Maria and Anthony slip toward the exit. But I wasn't done. Thank you, I said into the microphone. 3 months ago, I lost my place in my father's kitchen. But he left me something more valuable than a restaurant. He left me his knowledge, his techniques, and his dream of evolution. I turned to face the crowd. That's why I'm proud to announce the opening of Nuevo Marcos. Not a replacement for the original, but a continuation of his legacy. A place where tradition meets innovation, where the past guides us into the future. The room erupted again. Restaurant critics mobbed me with questions about the opening date. Investors pressed cards into my hands. Later that night, alone in my new restaurant space, I raised a glass to Dad's photo. You planned this all along, didn't you? I whispered. Knew they'd push me out, knew I'd need to make my own way. The next morning, Nina sent one final update. Maria had listed Marco's for sale. Without the real recipes, without the soul that Dad had infused into every dish, they couldn't keep it alive. 6 months later, Nuevo Marcos opened to rave reviews. The line stretched around the block, old customers mixing with new fans. The steel penny hung above the door, watching over a packed dining room where tradition and innovation danced on every plate. Maria and Anthony disappeared from Chicago's restaurant scene. Last I heard, they'd moved to Florida to try their luck there. But their failure wasn't my victory, my success was. Dad's notebook sits in my office now, its pages annotated with my own notes and adaptations. Sometimes late at night, I imagine him watching me in the kitchen, smiling as I teach my own staff the proper way to make marinara sauce. Not exactly the way he taught me, but close enough that his legacy lives on. And in the end, that's what he wanted all along, not for me to preserve the past, but to carry it forward into the future. Every night before service, I touch the steel penny above the door and whisper, Grazie, Papa. Thank you for teaching me that the greatest revenge isn't destroying what others build, it's building something better of your own. That's a lesson worth more than any recipe.
I stood in my father's office, my hands trembling slightly as he paced behind his mahogany desk. The family business logo, Wilson Manufacturing, cast a shadow on the wall behind him, a constant reminder of the legacy I was supposedly failing to uphold. Look at these numbers, Sarah, he snapped, slapping down the quarterly report. Down 15% under your management. Your grandfather built this company from nothing, and you're destroying it in months. I tried to keep my voice steady. Dad, if you'd just listen to my proposal about modernizing our... Enough. He cut me off, his face reddening. Your brother James was right. You're too weak, too soft for this business. All these new ideas, digital transformations. That's not how we do things here. My mother sat quietly in the corner, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her designer handbag. She wouldn't meet my eyes, she never did when Dad was in one of his moods. But the market is changing, I argued. If we don't adapt. I said enough. Dad slammed his hand on the desk. You've had your chance. 6 months as regional director, and all you've done is push for changes we don't need. James will take over your position effective immediately. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. James, my younger brother who spent more time playing golf than working, who'd never even bothered to learn our inventory system. That James. You can't be serious, I whispered. Mom finally spoke up, her voice soft but firm. Your father knows best, Sarah. Maybe this is a sign you should explore other opportunities. I looked between them, my father, red-faced and rigid with anger, and my mother, perfectly composed as always, more concerned with appearances than actual business sense. 28 years old with an MBA from Harvard and 5 years of experience at top consulting firms, and they still saw me as the little girl who wasn't tough enough to follow in my grandfather's footsteps. Fine, I said, my voice ice cold. I quit. Dad scoffed. You can't quit. You're fired. I took off my company ID and placed it carefully on his desk. You'll regret this, I said quietly. Are you threatening me? Dad's voice rose dangerously. No, I replied, gathering my dignity. I'm making a promise. As I walked out of that office, I could hear my mother calling after me. Sarah, don't be dramatic. Come back here. But I didn't look back. I had worked at Wilson Manufacturing since I was 16, starting in the warehouse, learning every aspect of the business. I knew our suppliers, our customers, our strengths, and most importantly, our weaknesses. I also knew something my father didn't. The company was in more trouble than just a 15% quarterly drop. In my office, I quickly downloaded key files onto my personal drive. Nothing confidential, just market research and customer feedback I'd gathered over the past 6 months. James might be taking my position, but my work was coming with me. As I packed my personal items into a box, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Marcus, our chief financial officer and one of the few people who supported my modernization plans. Just heard. They're making a huge mistake. Call me when you can. I smiled slightly. Dad had no idea what he'd just set in motion. His outdated management style and resistance to change weren't just costing us market share, they were driving away our best talent. Marcus wasn't the only one who saw it. Walking through the warehouse for the last time, I stopped to say goodbye to the workers I'd gotten to know over the years. Many looked shocked, some angry on my behalf. Don't worry about me, I told them. Sometimes the best thing that can happen is getting pushed out of your comfort zone. Outside, I placed my box in my car and took one last look at the building. Wilson Manufacturing had been my whole life, my inheritance, my future. Now it was just another company making the fatal mistake of clinging to the past. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I'd been saving for a special occasion. Hello, Michael. It's Sarah Wilson. Remember that investment opportunity we discussed? I'm ready to talk details. The next 6 months would change everything. Dad thought he was protecting his precious company from my progressive ideas. Instead, he'd just given me the push I needed to become his worst nightmare. Not just a competitor, but a threat he never saw coming. Little did they know being fired was just the beginning of my story. The real shock would come when they discovered exactly what I was capable of doing on my own. 6 months later, I sat in my sleek downtown office, reviewing the final documents. The view of the city skyline was a far cry from my old workspace at Wilson Manufacturing, but that wasn't the only thing that had changed. The numbers look good, Michael said, sliding another contract across my desk. Your father has no idea how bad things have gotten at Wilson. Their major clients are jumping ship and James. He chuckled. Well, let's just say golf skills don't translate to business acumen. I smiled, remembering how quickly everything had fallen into place after that fateful day. Michael, a venture capitalist I'd met at a business conference, had been eager to back my new company NextGen Manufacturing Solutions. We'd spent the past 6 months poaching top talent from Wilson and other competitors, implementing the very same modernization strategies my father had rejected. My phone buzzed, a text from Marcus, who'd resigned from Wilson 3 months ago to join me as CFO. Your brother just lost the Anderson account. Your father's having a meltdown. I wasn't surprised. The Anderson account had been with Wilson for 20 years. I'd personally handled their business for the past 3, which was why they'd followed me to NextGen without hesitation. Sarah, Michael leaned forward, his expression serious. Wilson Manufacturing's stock has dropped 40% since you left. They're vulnerable. If we move now. I nodded, pulling up the presentation on my laptop. The hostile takeover proposal is ready. We've acquired enough shares through shell companies over the past few months. One more push and we'll have controlling interest. Just then my assistant Emma knocked and entered. Ms. Wilson, your mother's been calling the office. She says it's urgent. Of course it was. Mom always thought everything was urgent. I hadn't spoken to my parents since that day, though I'd heard plenty through the grapevine. Dad's temper had gotten worse as the company struggled. James was in over his head and their best employees were leaving in droves. Tell her I'm in a meeting, I replied. Actually, tell her I'll see them all very soon. Emma nodded, trying to hide her smile. Everyone in the office knew what was coming. The next week passed in a blur of meetings and legal documents. Finally, everything was in place. Wilson Manufacturing was calling an emergency shareholders meeting to address the company's declining performance. As the new majority shareholder, though they didn't know it yet, I had a front row seat to what would become the most dramatic family reunion in corporate history. The morning of the meeting, I stood in front of my full-length mirror, adjusting my designer suit. Gone was the timid daughter trying to please her father. In her place stood a CEO who'd built a successful company from scratch in 6 months. Ready? Marcus asked, waiting by my office door. I grabbed my briefcase containing the takeover documents. Time to show them exactly how weak I am. We arrived at Wilson Manufacturing early. Through the glass doors I could see the shareholders gathering in the main conference room. Dad sat at the head of the table, trying to maintain his usual authoritative presence but looking notably strained. Mom sat beside him, perfectly coiffed as always but with worry lines around her eyes. James was there too, fumbling with his presentation notes. Your brother looks like he's about to be sick, Marcus whispered. Wait until he sees what's coming, I replied. At exactly 9 a.m. the meeting was called to order. I stood in the hallway, listening as Dad tried to explain away the company's failures, blaming market conditions, foreign competition, everything except his own poor leadership. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. The chairman announced, and now we must address the elephant in the room. A significant portion of company shares has been acquired by a new entity over the past 6 months. The new majority shareholder is here today to discuss the future of Wilson Manufacturing. I heard my mother's sharp intake of breath, my father's angry demand to know who dared to try and take his company. James was stuttering something about legal actions. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the conference room doors and walked in. The room fell silent. Mom's coffee cup slipped from her fingers, spilling across the polished table. Dad's face went from red to white in seconds. James looked like he might actually faint. I walked to the front of the room, placed my briefcase on the table and smiled. Shall we begin? This is impossible, Dad sputtered, half rising from his chair. You can't. You don't have the resources to. Actually, I said, opening my briefcase and distributing documents to the board members. I do. NextGen Manufacturing Solutions, my company, now owns 51% of Wilson Manufacturing shares. And this, I held up another document, is our proposal for complete acquisition. Mom was dabbing at the spilled coffee with trembling hands, her perfect composure finally cracking. Sarah, darling, surely we can discuss this as a family. Family. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. We stopped being a family the day you sat silently while Dad threw me out of my own inheritance. When you chose James, who couldn't tell a balance sheet from a birthday card, to run this company instead of me. James stood up, his face red. Now wait just a minute. Quarterly profits down 60%. I cut him off, clicking through my presentation. 8 major clients lost. 32 key employees resigned. And, I paused for effect. 3 pending lawsuits from customers due to quality control issues. Did I miss anything, James? Or were you too busy working on your golf swing to notice the company was sinking? The board members were whispering among themselves, reviewing the documents I'd provided. I could see the realization dawning on their faces. Wilson Manufacturing was no longer the powerhouse it had been. This is outrageous. Dad slammed his fist on the table. I built this company. No, I interrupted, my voice sharp. Grandfather built this company. You inherited it just like you planned to hand it to James. The difference is I earned my place here. I clicked to the next slide showing NextGen's impressive growth charts. While you were clinging to outdated methods, I built a modern, efficient company. We've doubled our market share in 6 months. Our digital infrastructure cuts costs by 40%. And those clients you lost. I smiled. They're all with us now. The board members were nodding. They could see the numbers didn't lie. You can't do this to your own father, Mom pleaded. Watch me, I replied. I'm offering a fair price for the remaining shares, well above market value. The alternative is watching Wilson Manufacturing become completely obsolete within a year. Dad slumped in his chair, suddenly looking old. Why? He asked quietly. Why not just build your own success? Why come back to destroy what I built? I walked over to him, placing my hands on the table and leaning forward. Because you needed to learn that being a woman doesn't make me weak. That your daughter could be just as capable, no more capable than your precious son. Consider this a very expensive business lesson. The vote was quick and decisive. The board approved the acquisition almost unanimously. As the meeting adjourned, I watched my father sign the final documents, his hand shaking slightly. The Wilson name stays, I told him as he stood to leave. But everything else changes. Starting tomorrow. He nodded stiffly, not meeting my eyes. Mom tried to hug me, but I stepped back. James had already slunk out of the room, probably heading straight to the golf course. Later that evening, I stood in what had been my father's office, my office now. The sun was setting over the city, casting long shadows across the floor. Marcus knocked and entered, carrying 2 glasses of champagne. Congratulations, so, he said, handing me a glass. I took it, looking around the office. You know what the funny thing is? Dad always said I was too soft for business. But he never understood, true strength isn't about being tough. It's about being smart, adaptable, and willing to change. To change, Marcus raised his glass. And to karma, I added with a smile. The next morning, a moving company arrived to clear out the old office furniture. Everything was getting an upgrade, new technology, new systems, new leadership. As I watched them work, my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Your father would like to talk. Maybe over dinner.